Hi, my name's Leah. I was married to Harold for over 30 years. Raised his son like he was my own. But when Harold died, my stepson told me not to come to the funeral. Said, "You don't belong at MY Daddy's send-off." The whole family stood by, quiet. Not one soul stopped him. But what none of them knew was that Harold left behind one final message just for me. And when that truth came out, everything changed. So now tell me, was I ever really part of their family or just a placeholder? The call came just after sunrise. I was still in my robe, holding my tea with both hands to keep them from trembling. Marcus's voice was as flat as the wallpaper peeling behind my kitchen sink. "Leah, I just wanted to let you know, the funeral's this afternoon, but it's gonna be a private family event." Private family event. I didn't say a word back, just sat there while the silence stretched out like an old rubber band about to snap. He cleared his throat. "You understand?" "No, baby, I didn't." But I said, "Okay," and hung up before the sound in my chest turned into something ugly. The cup stayed untouched on the table, steam fading, quiet like the room. Quiet like the way betrayal don't make a sound when it first hits. It just sits there, heavy, taking up space. In my mama's house, we said grief don't have rules, but apparently money does. I looked across the kitchen at the photo on the wall. Harold. That small smile he only gave when he was proud of something. My eyes burned. My mouth moved before I could stop it. "I hope you rest easy, even if I can't." He wasn't always cold. That man I married, Harold D. Thompson, built things, houses, porches, dreams. He was a man who used silence like mortar, steady, necessary, and full of weight. We were married 25 years. I was a nurse. He ran his own construction company. I came from a long line of Alabama women who scrubbed church pews and raised kids that weren't always theirs. Harold's folks, they came from something shinier. Old money, lighter skin, and rules I never quite fit into. I remember the first Thanksgiving. His daughter, Clarice, called me Miss Leah, like I was the cleaning lady. I laughed it off, but it cut deep. Not once did they call me Mom, or even Step, just Miss. There were dinners where they'd talk politics like I wasn't there. Make jokes about my accent. Harold would squeeze my hand under the table, but never spoke up. Colorism don't just live in books. It's in glances, tone, invitations that never arrive. I learned to smile through it because I loved him. And he, in his quiet way, loved me too. Maya Angelou once said, "I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." I held on to that, still do, but on days like today, it's harder to believe it. That afternoon, I got dressed in black, not to make a scene. I had no plans to cry at the pulpit or fight over the casket. I just wanted to say goodbye, proper. The church stood still under a thick grey sky, familiar old brick and white pillars. I knew half the folks in there from potlucks and choir rehearsals. I didn't make it past the gate. An usher, young man, couldn't have been more than 30, looked nervous just seeing me. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson. The families asked that the service remain private." He said it soft, like if he spoke too loud, I might fall apart. People turned, eyes on me like I'd crashed a party. But they didn't see shame. I didn't give 'em that. I smiled, small, tired. "Don't worry, baby. God saw me love him when you didn't." I walked up the steps, laid the bouquet white lilies, his favorite, right there on the cold stone. My fingers lingered, then let go. Then I walked. Not rushed, not flinching. My head high, my chest cracked wide open, but still I walked. Home didn't feel like home. Not that day. The keys felt heavier when I turned the lock. Every step inside echoed back at me like the house itself was confused. I stood in the living room. The quiet pressed in. That sofa where he used to nap on Sundays. The hallway where I'd hear his boots clunk after long days. Now it was just still. I sat at the kitchen table, Bible in front of me, opened to Proverbs. I didn't read, just underlined. Words about deceit and pride. The kettle screamed behind me. I'd put it on and forgotten, same as I'd forgotten to take down that photo. There we were, 10 years ago. His arm around me, my hand over his heart. Was it real or just convenient? Did I build a home or just live in someone else's shadow? I asked the room. No one answered. I heard Mama's voice in my head. When folks show you who they are, don't repaint the picture. Night came slow, heavy. I was folding the same towel twice when the knock came. Not loud, just 3 short taps. I opened the door to a courier in a navy jacket, holding a thick envelope like it held dynamite. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked. "Yes." "From the law offices of Barnes and Jefferson." He handed it over. I signed without reading, closed the door. Back at the table, I broke the seal. Hands shaking, paper thick like it cost more than any Sunday dress I ever owned. Per the instructions of Harold D. Thompson's estate. I stopped breathing. I read it again, then again. My heart didn't race. It dropped. Because in that moment, I knew this story wasn't over. 3 days had passed, and the silence in my house had settled into the walls like smoke after a fire. I hadn't answered a single text or voicemail since the funeral, not from Marcus, not from Clarice, not from any of them. Whatever they had to say could wait. I kept to myself, moved like a ghost through the house, touching things Harold once held, folded his suits one by one, his Sunday greys, his navy for business, and the deep charcoal one he wore when we renewed our vows in Savannah. That suit had shoulders strong like him, but now, just fabric, just memory. I wrapped it in plastic and set it gently in the back of the closet. That morning, I opened his desk drawer and found a bundle of old letters tied with a shoelace. Legal papers sat underneath, some I'd seen before, some I hadn't dared to touch until now. I hadn't read them yet. Some things require the right moment, and my soul hadn't caught up with my hands. Around 10, Miss Charlene came by with cornbread wrapped in a warm dish towel. She didn't stay long, just held my hand at the door and said, "Don't let them shake your peace, Leah. The Lord sees." Then she walked off before I could say thank you. After she left, I stood there holding the warm plate, knowing something was about to shift. It's that feeling you get deep in your bones, a feeling passed down from mama to daughter, back through generations of women who knew when the storm was coming. Then I heard a car engine shutting off, followed by footsteps on gravel. 3 knocks, firm, familiar. I didn't rush. I opened the door, slow, steady. There he stood, Marcus. Polished suit, tie too tight, jaw locked, and right beside him, Miss Dishell, the estate attorney, in her neat skirt suit and heels that clicked like they owned the pavement. I stepped aside, didn't say a word, didn't offer coffee. They followed me into the sitting room, shoes sinking into Harold's old rug. I motioned to the couch, then sat in Harold's chair. Not out of habit, out of principle. Marcus cleared his throat. "We need to talk about the will. The envelope the courier brought. We need it." I blinked. "Envelope?" He leaned forward. "Don't play dumb, Leah. Daddy made changes to the will before he passed. We need to see it." Mr. Shell spoke with a lawyer's calm. "Technically, Mrs. Thompson has legal right to review the documents privately. But it would be helpful if we could—" "They only knock," I said, cutting her off, "when they think you got something they want. Never just to check if you still breathing." Marcus's face tightened. "I'm under pressure. You don't understand. There's things tied up in Daddy's name. We need access today." I didn't flinch. "I see." Truth was, the envelope had been in my safe since the day it came. I'd read every word that night, twice, and then again the next morning just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. Harold had changed his will, quietly, thoroughly, and Marcus's name? It wasn't there. As Marcus rambled, I remembered a conversation from a month before Harold passed. He'd been distant then, furtive calls, meetings he brushed off. One night, over tea, he looked at me and said, "I need to fix some things before it's too late." I didn't ask what he meant. I wish I had. Another flash 2 weeks before the heart attack. He stood by the window, watching the rain, and mumbled, "They think they got it all figured out, but I won't let them take everything." In this moment, as Marcus sat in my living room, pretending this was business, I understood. Harold had protected me the only way he knew how, on paper. "You tried to erase me at the funeral, Marcus," I thought to myself. "But your daddy might have done the opposite when no one was looking." He stood now, voice raised. "I need to see that envelope, Leah. I'm not asking again." Miss Dishell held up a hand. "Let's all calm down, Leah. You've had time to review." I stood too. "Yes, I've read it." Marcus froze. "I read it. Harold changed it. Your name ain't on it no more." "That's a lie," he shouted. "He wouldn't do that. You manipulated him. You don't belong in our family." I looked him in the eye. I didn't uninvite nobody from a funeral. That was you. He opened his mouth again, but I kept talking. Harold made his peace with me before he passed. Maybe you should have done the same. He looked like he might throw something. Instead, he just stared, breathing hard, silent rage. You don't get to come in here barking orders after treating me like a stranger, I said. You never did like that your father had a woman who wouldn't bow. Mr. Shell rose slowly, gathering her briefcase. Perhaps we'll revisit this another time. No, Marcus said, voice low, sharp. If you think this is over, you're wrong. I walked them both to the door. Tell the rest of your people, don't come here playing chess with checkers. They left without another word. I stood at the threshold, watching their car drive off, the silence curling around me again like smoke. Then I closed the door, leaned against it, and whispered to myself, I've been quiet long enough. I was halfway through my morning coffee when my bank called. Something in the way their voice trembled told me it wasn't routine. Mrs. Patterson, my longtime banker at the credit union, asked, softly at first, Ma'am, did you authorize a withdrawal from Harold's joint account yesterday? I sat there in silence, Mark warming my fingers. My heart skipped. No, I didn't. But the words were still in my mouth when she continued. The transaction had been recorded Harold's signature the day after his funeral. My breath stilled. My mind raced. Someone had tampered with his account. Someone had the audacity to try while I was still grieving in a church hallway. Mrs. Patterson hesitated, voice shaky. I just wanted to confirm before I freeze it. Grief brings out the truth in folks, and sometimes that truth is uglier than death. I told her to wait. I needed details. I needed names. I needed proof. She promised to fax transaction slips. We hung up. By mid-morning, I was dressed in my quietest strength. Black dress, pearls, hair tucked close. I left the house, closed the door behind me as though locking in resolve. At the credit union, voices hushed as I stepped inside. They said, Miss Thompson, with respect. I didn't flinch. I walked to Mrs. Patterson's office. She slid the slips across the desk like they were poisoned. The numbers looked precise, too precise. Signatures matched curves Harold used in his penmanship. I asked who made the withdrawal. Her eyes flickered, then down. Marcus's assistant, she said, using a power of attorney Harold never revoked. I didn't cry, didn't gasp. I nodded and signed the freeze order. Freeze everything, I said, voice calm. They thought I'd be too broken to notice. The betrayal stung, but beneath it I felt a flicker of something else admiration. For Harold, who must have suspected this would come? Who must have planned for me? When I got home, I sat by the window. The afternoon sun was pale, cold. I thought back to a memory. Harold and I side by side in that same bank lobby a month ago. He squeezed my hand and whispered, If anything ever happens to me, don't trust the first face that smiles. I had laughed it off then, young love. Now I see. I see exactly what he meant. I pictured him slipping a second envelope into his jacket. unseen, unspoken. The envelope I'd opened that very first night, the one that held his last intentions. I whispered, "You knew they'd come for it, didn't you?" Yes, he did. And maybe that's why he changed the will, not for show, for survival, for me. That evening, just as daylight retreated, Miss Dishell came to my door again. She moved with cautious dignity. Inside, she confirmed what I'd suspected. The will is legitimate. In it, Harold named me majority heir. Marcus is cut from the core of it. I blinked. He never told me this. Never said a word about the company or his plan. She warned me Marcus wouldn't go quietly. Already. Hired new attorneys. I nodded, steady. "Let him come," I said. "This time, I'll be standing." She paused, soft voice. "Be careful. He's dangerous when cornered." I remembered my grandmother. "Ain't no storm strong enough to drown a woman who's been baptized in fire." I took the will, locked it in the safe, walked to my window and watched dusk stretch across Atlanta. The world darker than before. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text glowed. "You don't know what you've started." In that moment, I held the will tight and whispered into the dark, "Let's see how this unfolds." The sun had started leaning westward, casting soft gold through my living room blinds. I sat still for a long while, after the bank call and the warning text, just letting the quiet speak. Some folks call it intuition. In our family, we call it spirit talk. The way your gut whispers what your ears haven't heard yet. I got up and walked to Harold's old roll-top desk. That thing been sitting in the corner since '92, collecting receipts, mail, pens that barely wrote. But deep down, I knew Harold never let it stay cluttered just for show. There was always a method to his mess. Behind the top drawer, under the felt lining, I found it, the small brass key. I unlocked the bottom drawer and opened a file labeled Legacy. It felt too neat, too deliberate. Inside, amendments to the will. Signatures didn't sit right with me. Some curled where Harold never curled. Pen pressure light, inconsistent. A trained hand might not notice. A wife would. And there it was, tucked beneath the papers, a black and white photo. Me and Harold, hand in hand at our anniversary dinner 3 years ago. Candlelight, fried catfish, and him looking like he could still dance. That photo used to sit right on the mantel. I hadn't seen it in weeks. Somebody had moved it. My chest tightened. I held the frame. There was tape residue on the back, like it had been removed in haste. Maybe Marcus didn't want folks at the funeral remembering us like that. Maybe he thought pictures only belonged to the story he wanted to tell. But Harold, he must have left this on purpose. Not loud, not legal, but meaningful. His kind of message. I heard the gate latch click a little after 4. I peeked out the blinds, Zelma Crenshaw. Lord, if you ever needed a southern woman to carry a secret and look good doing it, Zelma was her. She walked in, pressed an old envelope into my hand, said nothing for a minute. Then, "He gave this to me. Told me not to open it unless you needed help." It was Harold's handwriting. The envelope yellowed, creased. Inside, a single page. Zelma, if Leah ever asks, tell her I saw what was coming. I tried to fix it. Don't let Kendall see what he thinks he's erasing. H, I read it twice, 3 times. Zelma watched me, her eyes watery but sharp. They thought they could write you out. Let 'em gasp when they realize what you're holding. I nodded slow. Thank you. But don't tell nobody else. Not yet. She touched my hand. I got you, Leah. I always did. That night, I started preparing. I pulled out Harold's piano bench and sat down. The old keys hadn't been played since Christmas, but touching them gave me stillness. I wrote the letter by hand, 1 copy to Marcus, another to Miss Dishel's office, formal but clear. I wanted a meeting in 3 days, my home, my terms. No emotion, no accusation, just invitation. I placed the legal documents and the photo in a flat leather folder one Harold bought for me at a yard sale years back. Said it looked presidential. When I finished, I texted Dishel, "Bring Marcus, all parties present." The words felt heavier than they looked. Then I sat still and waited. Somewhere past 7, the light outside began to dim. I turned off the lamp and let the silence take over. That's when I heard it, 3 soft knocks. Not at the door, at the window of my home office. I stood, frozen, looked over, a silhouette, broad shoulders, tilted head. Marcus. He didn't wait. Just slipped a folded paper through the crack in the window pane, then walked off. I unfolded it, typed, no signature. You don't know how dangerous truths can be. Don't make me regret letting you live this long. My hand trembled, just for a second. But I didn't drop the photo. I stood there, breathing slow. He thinks threats undo strength. But I don't speak. I submit evidence. The kitchen felt heavy that afternoon sunlight, filtered through lace curtains, casting patterns on the linoleum floor. I sat quietly, phone in hand, looking at Marcus's last message over and over. You don't know what you've started. It echoed in my skull. The kettle whistled. I didn't move. Didn't even think of pouring water. I glanced at Harold's photos lined up on the counter, wedding day, Christmas morning, us walking beside Lake Martin. My fingers hovered over them before retreating. I thought of pushing them all off the shelf. But they're mine. My touchstones. My proof. I couldn't let them go. Legally, Marcus still occupied parts of Harold's domain business, names, house addresses, old leases. Figuratively, he refused to acknowledge me. Banned from the church, knocked out of the funeral. Yet he acts like he owns this grief. I stood and walked to the window. The street stretched calm, neighbors going about their Friday. But something's brewing something in the wind. The mail slot clinked. Envelope slid inside. Marcus's name printed neatly on the front. My heart pounded. I pulled it out. It felt heavier than its weight. I slit it open. Inside was a funeral invitation dated 3 days ago. Mailed late, addressed to me. There was no RSVP line. I flipped it over. My name, struck through in red ink. Beneath, his name alone. Program details, service start, speakers, music rehearsal. I pressed my palm over the card, reading again. They edit me out even in their script, I whispered. I walked outside into the porch dusk. He stood across the street, beneath the street light. He looked calm, too calm. I raised the card. You think this erases me? I said. I'm still in every memory you can't delete, he smirked. You're welcome to join the program as long as you don't disrupt the show. I kept my voice steady. I built half the show. You just flipped the script. He glared. You don't belong. You never did. I inhaled cold air. Then, show me the original program Dichelle's copy. I want to see what they try to hide. He stepped back, jaw tight. Disbelief and fury warred in his eyes. Back inside, I returned to the envelope. I slid the invitation out and found another sheet, tucked behind it a typed clause, unseen at first glance. Any ghost who returns will forfeit their claim. I read it twice. Harold had anticipated someone like Marcus, had added this clause quietly. I felt his presence in that phrase, protective. Outside, a car horn honked. I looked up. Dichelle's car idled at my driveway. I set the card and clause side by side on the table. Quietly, deliberately. Marcus wants the stage. He'll get it. But only after people see the backstage lies. Dichelle knocked gently. I opened the door. Eyes narrowed. She stood holding a larger envelope manila, official. She handed it over. You need to know what he's planning next, she said. I looked down as I opened it. The documents inside were drafts of an obituary without me. No mention of Leah Thompson. I stared. The silence pressed in. They tried erasing me, I whispered, voice steady. Let's see them finish. Morning light filtered weak through the blinds as I scrolled through my phone again, this time with dread. A headline from a small gossip site. Harold married Leah to care for him, not love. My children and neighbors had already forwarded it in church group threads, my name being reshaped in rumors while I was still licking my wounds. I called Pastor Davis. He answered with concern, asked if these things had reached the church floor. I swallowed tight. Yes, I admitted, voice low. He promised to check on it, to stop talk at the door. Back inside, my inbox glowed. Screenshots of those forwarded messages, unkind whispers about my role. They called me caretaker, third party, wife by convenience. My palms sweated. They strike where pride hurts. They know I'm old, black and judged already. I held the silence until my grief turned into resolve. I refused to sit and absorb this. I opened my laptop and drafted a letter. Plain text, no flourish. Call me not nurse, but wife. One who loved, one who sacrificed. I paused before hitting send. This wasn't for public eyes yet. This was for the family's ears first. I found Harold's old letter in the safe, the one he wrote years ago. In his handwriting, he addressed me. My equal, Leah. That phrase felt heavy in my bones. I put the letter beside my draft. my shield against slander. I sent the letter to Marcus and Dichelle's office. Quiet, firm, no threatening words, just truth laid bare. Later, Zelma showed up. She brought another envelope, smaller, fragile. She said she buried it because Harold asked her to. Inside, the letter read, "They may erase my name, but they can't erase my vow." My breath stuck. This was his voice, speaking through time. Zelma warned, "Quiet. Marcus might twist this, call it influence." But I nodded. The risk was real. The truth, more. I would use both statements, the public note, his private letter, as twin weapons. That afternoon, Mr. Milton from the barber shop popped in. He wore a solemn look. "Miss Leah, I heard talk out on the block, but folks here remember you. When Harold was down, you were up." My throat thickened, but I steadied. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than noise." I thought about going back to church Sunday, standing in my dress, walking down that aisle. They banned me from the funeral, but they can't ban me from memory. Evening came slow. I checked my messages, nothing new. Then I saw the envelope on the floor by my door. My letter returned. Pages defaced. Margins crossed out. Insults scrawled in red. At the end, "You think you can rewrite history? Watch me bury you with your own words." Anger flickered. My pulse thundered, but I placed it down. Breathed deep. They tried burying me in rumors. Let them see the roots that still rise. I woke before dawn. Heart restless. The safe sat open on my dresser from the night before. I reached in, fingers brushing the leather folder, the photo, and that clock Harold wore. It was tucked in a velvet pouch, his initials engraved. I held it close, turning it slowly. That clock meant something they tried to steal. I thought back to Marcus wearing it in family portraits, like he belonged in a place never earned. I sat at my desk and spread papers. The amended will pages, my public letter, Harold's old letter. I opened a blank document and wrote a speech I'd give to neighbors, friends, church members. I needed them to understand. A voice inside me said, "They wanted silence. They'll hear me in the light." I made copies of the photo and documents, placed them in soft envelopes. I printed bullet points. I ran Zelma and a few trusted neighbors. I arranged for them to come later in the morning to my living room to bear witness. By mid-morning, I was standing in my living room, the clock on display beside me. The room filled slowly. Zelma, Mr. Milton, a few neighbors from down the block. Marcus arrived late, shoulders tight. He looked at the clock first. I held it high and said, "You see this clock? Marcus wore it in family photos, but he never earned it." I pointed to the pet engraving and serial number, showing how Harold purchased it for me as a gift years ago. Some heads turned, gasps. The symbolism landed heavy, Marcus claiming legacy he never built. He swallowed, eyes flicking around. I continued, voice steady. He wore what he didn't belong to. He claimed what he never built. Silence exploded. The clock weighed more in their eyes than it had in my hands. Then Tavian stepped forward. I recognized the look in his eyes. He held a sketch, Leah and Harold holding hands under a tree, sunset behind them. The caption read, "My real grandmom." He cleared his throat and read, "I seen them together in pictures my daddy hid. I knew her before the world erased her." The room hushed. Children don't lie. His voice trembled only slightly, but the truth was steady. I moved to him, pulled him close. Tears threatened, but I held them back. I looked at Marcus. The betrayal in his eyes stung colder than any insult. Neighbors stood then. Zelma spoke. "Leah has done for this community quietly, but always. Who remembers when Harold was nursing a coughing fit and she stayed up nights?" Whispers passed. Marcus opened his mouth, claimed entitlement, inheritance, but until a voice interrupted. "You ain't lived her years," someone whispered. Others nodded. I listened. Then I spoke. "If you needed me, you never asked. If you needed respect, you never gave it. But tonight, I speak for myself and for all who've been treated like silence." The gathering shifted. Marcus's allies stuttered. His power flickered in the presence of truth. I remained calm, dignified, letting their reaction speak. I watched the balance of power begin to lean. After folks dispersed, I walked to the porch. The clock, the letters, their stories, they felt heavier now. On the table sat a sealed envelope I hadn't noticed earlier. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, a notice from a Georgia High Court. Notice of emergency motion to reopen estate litigation, date and time enclosed. My breath caught. I folded the paper. My resolve solidified. Tomorrow, I walk into that courtroom with every truth I hold. I woke early, dressed in my quiet black, the kind that commands respect without a sound. I tucked Harold's clock into my folder, placed the photo beside it, and locked eyes with myself in the mirror. I whispered, "Let truth walk before you." On the drive downtown, my heart thumped hard. Evidence flickered through my mind, the amendments, the gardener's memory, Tavian's drawing, Zelma's letter, all thread by thread woven together. The courthouse loomed ahead, glass and stone, its doors heavy with judgment. Reporters lined the sidewalk. Security guards nodded stiffly. This was no longer a family matter. It was war made public. My pulse hammered as I stepped into the hallways, marble echoing my footsteps. I could feel eyes scanning me, measuring me. I straightened, folded my hands, and prepared for the battle. In court, the air felt thin. I sat behind my lawyer as the judge called us forward. When it was time, our side called Mr. Robinson, the gardener. He shuffled up, slow but steady. Zelma stood behind him, head bowed, respectfully. Under oath, he said, "I worked on Mr. Harold's place for years." The judge nodded. He continued, "One night, I saw Mr. Marcus slip into the study after dark. He carried a stack of papers. I saw the light under the door go out." He cleared his throat. "Miss Leah, I thought you ought to know Mr. Marcus was up there at midnight." A murmur traveled across the courtroom. Marcus shifted in place, face turning pale. He looked every bit like a man caught in a lie. I remained silent, letting his words settle. They dropped like stones. The room held its breath. Marcus's attorney rose next. He smirked comfortably as he addressed the court. "Let's be clear. Everyone here knew where this was headed," he said. Harold mentioned changing things. Mrs. Thompson was often present at business meetings. Perhaps she influenced him. He called forward witnesses, former clients, contractors, people who remembered seeing Leah at Harold's side visits, attending meetings. Whispers spread, undue influence, manipulation, hidden hand. My chest tightened. They confused presence with persuasion, but presence was my right. I stayed calm. No interruption. I let their words echo. Then our attorney asked for the hidden letter. Zelma handed it forward. The judge accepted it as new evidence. The envelope was unsealed. The reading began. "If any ghost returns seeking gains, they forfeit all. Leah is to hold every right." A hush struck. Marcus's face drained, his lips parted, eyes wide. The words carried weight. Harold had anticipated treachery and protected me by his own hand. My heart pinched. This was his voice speaking, still shielding me from shadow. The judge leaned forward. "Given this new evidence, the court will recess and review all motions in light of the letter." I exhaled quiet. The storm had shifted. The floor had tilted. I walked out of the courtroom gently, folder clutched close. The corridors seemed longer now. Marble walls watched me. Reporters surged outside. One camera flashed at me. I paused. "I trusted truth," I said simply. "Let it do the talking." I looked across the street and saw Marcus in his car, windows up, eyes fixed on me. Rage, fear, both flickering in his face. I glanced down at the letter in my hand, folded red across the words Harold left for me. I whispered under my breath, yet loud enough for the wind to carry. "Tomorrow they'll have to face what they erased." The morning broke quiet, soft, like the house itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. I got up before the sun, brewed my coffee, and stood at the kitchen window watching the first light move slow across the porch rails. "Ain't nothing more honest than morning light," I said under my breath. "It doesn't lie, it just reveals what's been there all along." Not long after, Zelma pulled up out front. She came in with Mr. Ingram, the estate lawyer, both dressed proper but calm. He carried a slim black case, the kind that holds endings and beginnings all at once. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson," he greeted, setting it down. "We've got the finalized documents. Harold left something for you as well." We sat at the dining table. The laptop glowed to life as he pressed play. There he was, Harold, sitting straight, wearing his blue church jacket, voice steady as stone. "If you're seeing this, Leah, then the storm's past." I knew Marcus would challenge what he didn't understand, so I made sure the truth wouldn't be buried. "You are the root of this family, and roots don't beg to be seen, they just keep holding." My throat tightened, and Zelma dabbed her eyes quietly beside me. The lawyer nodded. Mrs. Thompson. The court has confirmed this as the final, unchallengeable will. The home, the trust, the foundation funds, they're all in your name. I let out a slow breath. It wasn't joy I felt, it was peace. He knew all along, I whispered. He saw this coming. Mr. Ingram smiled gently. He trusted you to carry what he built and to finish what he started. By afternoon, the air was still and heavy. I was sitting on the porch when I saw Marcus walking up the driveway. No suit, no anger, just quiet. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, head down. "Why him and not me?" he asked finally, voice low, cracking like dry wood. I didn't move right away. I looked at him, the same boy who used to sit on these steps with Harold, pretending the world was fair. "Your father loved you, Marcus," I said. "He just waited for you to show him you loved him back." He looked up at me then, eyes red. For the first time, he didn't look like my enemy. He looked like a son who finally saw what he'd lost. I pulled out a chair beside me. "You don't have to be my son," I said, calm but steady. "But you don't have to be my enemy either." He's Saturday, not long, just enough for silence to settle between us. Then he nodded, stood up, and walked away slow, like he was trying to remember how to carry peace. That evening, I went down to the church for the board meeting. The fellowship hall still smelled like polish and paper fans. I laid Harold's folder on the table and said, "I want to use part of his estate to open a literacy center for the men trying to come home and rebuild their lives. Harold used to tell me, if a man can read, he can rebuild." The room went still for a moment, then quiet nods, small smiles. "Mr. Milton spoke up. That's the kind of legacy that don't fade, Miss Leah." I smiled, feeling something new lifting me, like the end of grief and the start of purpose. This wasn't about what I'd lost anymore. It was about what I could build. After the meeting, I stood on the church steps, watching people head out to their cars, the street lamps flickering on. For once, the world didn't feel heavy, it just felt alive. That night, I placed Harold's wedding ring on the nightstand. The bed beside me was still empty, but not lonely anymore. "You did right by me, Harold," I whispered. "Now I'll do right by them." I turned off the lamp. The room fell into that soft, forgiving dark where peace finally stays. The house no longer carried echoes of fighting, it carried the sound of living again. Before I closed my eyes, I spoke one last truth into the quiet. You can't erase truth. It remembers where it's been. And just like that, I knew this story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who ever believed that love, real love, can outlast betrayal.